International review time. ROSALÍA, Reliquia. Let's talk about it. How y'all doing? Welcome to Let's Talk About It Music Reviews Season 11. How y'all doing? Welcome to the show. Guys, we got another international review for y'all today. We're covering this album. It's called Lux from ROSALÍA. She dropped this new album that I've been checking out. I've got a few listens in. I'll be saving my thoughts till probably Wednesday. I think Wednesday I'll have a full-ass album review. And you might be saying, Music Critic, look, I get it. You review albums and all this stuff, but you're really going to review a whole-ass ROSALÍA album. And I'm going to say yes, I will be doing that. We'll be doing a Lux album review pretty soon. I'm going to try my best to... I'm going to try my best, alright? We're going to get the titles down, I'll have it all down by the time I do an album review. But guys, let's just talk about one song, because actually this is one of my favorite tracks off this album, and unsurprisingly so, this is one of the more hit songs that are off the album right now that I was checking out. I was like, what should I do for another track review? It's been a couple of days since I talked about ROSALÍA, we might as well bring it back again. And I said, you know what, this song should be perfect for that. Reliquia is the new song. This one actually has a lot going on, which I was surprised. When I listen to songs in the big 2025, it is fucking impossible to have some, layers to it, to actually have, maybe a cohesive storyline, maybe to actually have something that really grabs you on when you're listening to a goddamn song. So coming into this song, I was actually pretty surprised. And even if you can't speak the language that's being spoken here, I think the way, that's done, the way the song's been made, I don't even think you need to even watch the captions, if you can't even understand the language. If you can even understand it, hey, this song might be, one of your favorite songs of all fucking time, but I don't even think you need to even know what this language is or to understand what the words are being said, because I think the way this song is kind of built up, it runs really smoothly. I think you can kind of get the idea of what's going on here. A lot of places, it says a lot of places on here, so you just need to know the places to really, connect the dots here, etc. I think this is a pretty nice, friendly kind of, song to get into. And I also do like the emotional fact that's in this song. It's really baked in here. When you do classical production, when you actually do, kind of operic style, classical, kind of going back in time, really reminds you of that kind of, romanticism period or something like that. You have the violins that just sound absolutely fantastic on here. Lord Almighty, when you have those elements that are in here, and you actually mix in, some really cool switch-ups, some actually nice violin switch-ups that are kind of, in-depth into this instrumental, I think you're just going to really have a really good time with this track. So let's get into it. Let's start talking about it. Starting off with this instrumental. I really do enjoy this instrumental. Going into this song, I was wondering, honestly going into this whole album, y'all know my history so far about this album that I checked out Bergadin. And when I checked out that track, I was like, okay, this is definitely not for me. This is definitely something that, I definitely would not play in 1,000 years. I would want to save my hearing. I feel like I lose my hearing where how, loud those fucking strings were and how loud those fucking scream vocals were. Lord mighty. But this is not that case. I think the way the violins are done here are absolutely beautiful. I like the build-up. I like the background, too. I like how these violins actually have some layers to them. I like how you get this one, you get this 1, 5, or 10 second wave, and then it switches to this other wave, then it switches and switches and switches, and I like that. It just makes the classical instrumental actually feel like a real classical instrumental, like an instrumental that actually has a lot of life to it, actually has a lot going on when you're listening to the track, which is pretty cool. And then you also have the moments where there is kind of a beat. Now, it's not really much of a beat. It's kind of, one little, kind of like, I guess you could say kind of like a snare, but the snare's kind of, they kind of change the effects up on it, so it doesn't really sound like that. And then you have that string guitar that's kind of, you know, keeping the whole rhythm, the whole vibe going throughout this whole entire track. I think the way that's worked, it's done pretty beautifully well in my opinion. I like the sound of it. And you know, then you get into the verses, and this is where, guys, I'm hearing some of the best fucking singing, I think, in 2025, which is kind of crazy to say. But the way Rosalia is singing on here, you know, especially with that verse, the way she's connecting with, the lyrics too, you know, connecting with places that you've been and, you know, the experiences that you've gained. And when you have that, you know, going throughout this whole entire track, you know, it's actually done very well, singing very beautifully. And then you have a nice verse, and I like the slight flow switches that are in this verse. It just overall sounds really goddamn fire to listen to. And then you get into, you know, that hook. You know, I was really surprised about this hook. The way this hook, you know, has that slight, you know, melody switch up. And then she kind of, you know, calms her vocals down. But, you know, not really calms them down, but kind of, makes her vocals really softer. But then, you know, even more powerful when you're listening to the song. And it's like, holy shit, you know, fucking hell. Go goddamn crazy, in my opinion, you know. And I think overall, you know, I really do enjoy that. I think this is one of the best hooks that I've heard from Rosalia. You know, the way it gets stuck in your head, the way she ends the hook off with, you know. I just think overall this is a pretty good hook. I think it has a really nice sound to it. And then you also get a whole ass ending song switch up, which honestly, I didn't expect to be so many switch ups from a Rosalia album. You know, I didn't think, you know, there would be all these different switch ups that sound absolutely fire. I mean, Lord goddamn mighty. But then you have this switch up where, you know, the instrumental gets deeper. You know, you actually have Rosalia singing in these more opera kind of style of vocals. Completely kills it, by the way. Completely goes fucking insane with those opera style vocals. I think that's one of the main things that really caught me off guard. Was I was like, oh shit, you know, these are like for real opera fucking style ass vocals that are being fucking sang here. And it's like, god damn, you know, this shit's fucking fire. And then you just get into this song where, you know, you get this switch up where she kind of switches her whole entire flow, even switches her vocal style at the end, and just kind of, you know, kills it. You know, the instrumental is building up even more. I like those opera background vocals and, you know, that opera style that's kind of, you know, helping lifting up this track. And this track is kind of like a spiritual fucking, you know, experience if you really want to think about it. I mean, Lord goddamn mighty. I mean, this shit will have you fucking shaking in your boots. You know, you're going to have, you know, you might want to just bring this to church just to fucking, you know, try it out. You know, just, you know, get everybody fucking, you know, on their knees and praying to God. Because that's how you're going to fucking feel when you get to this second fucking switch up, because it's that goddamn fire. Overall, guys, when we talk about this song, when we talk about Rosalia, you know, Reliquia, I think this is a really nice track. You know, I think this track actually sounds really goddamn fire. You know, I like all the classical instrumental moments that are in this song. And I like how just, you know, the verses are really good. You know, the storyline is really good. The lyrics are really good. Vocals are really good. Nothing to really complain about, actually. You know, I was wondering if there's anything to complain about. I'm going to say nah. I mean, this is a completely good-ass track to listen to, and I highly recommend it off this album. There's some tracks that I definitely will be talking about, you know, when I do my whole album review, you know, how I'm feeling about those tracks. There's even tracks that are better than this one right here. So there's a lot to this goddamn album. So overall, guys, I'm easily going to give this track an 8 out of 10. 8 out of 10, guys. What y'all think about it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? I don't know. Let me know. If you're on YouTube, Spotify, Pandora, wherever you get your podcast at, make sure you follow, turn on notifications, guys. We're dropping new content every